So what's the situation like in Africa? Because like I said, governments need money, they need resources. Human rights or the provision of basic resources government has to have resources. In Africa, okay, that's the economic resources, the economic situation in Africa. In Africa, one of the biggest challenges that the continent is facing is the reducing sources of taxable income. The minister today was talking about the neoliberal policies. In Africa, we embraced the neoliberal policies. We liberalized extensively our economy, and that means we are losing a lot of revenue in terms of import taxes. In some countries, the income taxes used to account for almost 40% of the revenue. We also liberalized our services, especially the banks, insurance, telecommunication, and these facilitate, as you know, a lot of outflow of resources. We have signed so many bilateral investment treaties, and under this treaty, we allow the transfer of resources, transfer of profits. We don't mind whether they bring in joint ventures. So they are not joint ventures, they are not decent jobs, so there is no pay as you earn. We also allow a lot of tax exemptions and tax holidays in order to attract investors. In fact, in some instances, government has given tax holidays of almost 25 years. They also, as you have heard, transnational corporations are dodging taxes, and there's a lot of illicit financial flows. Then there is also the whole issue of the falling commodity prices. And in addition to that, there is a decreasing overseas development assistance because of the financial crisis in Europe. So when you combine all these factors, African governments have very little money to provide resources. So what's the tax policy? And when we look at the tax policy, we need to ask ourselves, who is bearing the tax burden? No? In order to fill that gap, who is there to bear that burden? Increasingly, there is a lot of demand on African government to increase domestic resource mobilization. And in most countries in Africa, the taxes which are levied are mainly indirect taxes because, for example, VAT, these are easier to collect because they are on consumables. And we also have a very large informal sector, so it's easier to collect taxes on consumables like salt, sugar, paraffin. This is a very regressive tax system, and it puts more burden on the poor, especially the women. As you have already heard, even in Africa, corporations are paying very little taxes because of the tax exemptions and the tax holidays. And we have also signed so many double taxation treaties. When it comes to allocation of resources, revenue allocation, in Africa, there is a pressure on government to develop the economy. And what IMF and World Bank have advised is that development is going to come out of infrastructure development. So as a continent, they have come up with an infrastructure development program, huge infrastructure program of about $360 billion. That's Africa-wide, but also at national level, governments are investing a lot in infrastructure. But the infrastructure is the big infrastructure, the railway, the dams, huge dams, and there's a lot of allocation of budgetary resources to this infrastructure. But what should be noted here is that infrastructure is being financed by loans from World Bank and other sources. So there is the whole issue of debt repayment. In fact, on the African continent, many countries are paying, they are allocating a budget to paying, to servicing their loans. The budget outlay to the debt servicing is even higher than the expenditure on social services like education and health. So what I'm saying here is that reduced allocation to the social services is impacting a lot on the poor, especially the women. And when you look at education, for example, in my country, there's because of the poor infrastructure in schools and education institutions, girls are dropping out because of lack of things like sanitary towels and lack of facilities. And also the hospitals don't have facilities, especially for women. That was a campaign in my country, and it was because so many women are really dying in hospitals because of lack of medicines, especially the pregnant women. And that was a very big demonstration and campaign in Uganda. So as a way forward, as a recommendation, I think the whole issue here, what we need to ask ourselves is really how do we safeguard human rights in times of financial and economic crisis? Because if there is a crisis, monies go, resources are allocated to different areas, not to provision of social services. So we need really to grapple with that issue. How do we safeguard the human rights and access to social services? And I think there is a need to increase our understanding, and not just us, but all citizens, government, members of parliament, on the linkages between the fiscal policy and human rights, especially on specific rights, like the right to water, the right to education, right to health, and also for the specific groups like gender rights and, girl child rights. And we need also to work on alternatives. This has been pointed out, reduce corporate tax exemptions, tax holidays, and, evasions and avoidance. And we need to ensure that so many citizens participate in the whole issue of resource mobilization, allocation, and also utilization. But we also need to look at the broad economy. Sometimes we talk about allocating resources, but where are those resources going to come from? So we need to look at the economy. How do we grow the economy sustainably? So we need to look at issues of trade, issues of investment. And lastly, we should also use the human rights yardstick as a benchmark to benchmark fiscal policies. I'll stop there. Thank you.